Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight in today, looking at Nigeria through, well, a whole stack of news headlines from April 21st, 2025.
Yeah, and what's really striking is just the sheer range of topics. You've got security worries right next to economic news, social issues, cultural achievements.
Exactly. It's like a snapshot, isn't it? It really gives you a sense of the key things happening, the forces at play in Nigeria right at this moment.
Absolutely. And our goal here really is to try and piece these headlines together, see the connections, find the underlying patterns.
So by the end, hopefully you'll have well, a much richer picture of what's going on.
That's the plan.
Okay, so where do we start? I think the security and justice headlines are pretty hard to ignore. They feel particularly intense right now.
They really do. You have that very strong statement from retired General Danjuma.
Yeah, calling for citizens to, quote, defend yourselves against bandits. That was in relation to the awful killings in Plateau and Benue states.
And for someone like Danjuma to say that, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the public mood, the anxiety around security in those areas, maybe a sense that, the official security isn't enough.
hmm And then you see Vice President Shittima visiting Plateau right after. That seems like a direct government response, acknowledging how serious it is.
Definitely. Acknowledging the gravity, perhaps partly prompted by Danjuma's comments as well.
And tied into all this, we see the Senate, Senator Bamidele specifically, saying they're drafting a law for state police.
Right. Which, for a lot of people, sounds like a sensible step, More local control, maybe more effective policing.
But then, and this is where it gets interesting, the very same week, we hear that state police was actually off agenda when the National Economic Council met.
Yeah, that's a fascinating contrast. The NEC advises the president on the economy, sure, but its agenda often hints at wider government priorities.
So a disconnect. Senate moving one way, the NEC, or perhaps the executive branch it represents, maybe not prioritizing it in the same way.
It certainly highlights the complexities, maybe differing views within the government itself on how best to tackle these deep security problems.
Definitely. And while those high-level talks are happening, the headlines, they keep bringing us back to the ground level, don't they?
They do. You've got the arrest of a student linked to that bombing at the College of Education in Gusau.
A stark reminder.
And then reports of vigilantes fighting off bandits in Sokoto, one person killed there. And kidnappings, too, 7 passengers taken in Kwara.
It shows the threats are ongoing, widespread.
These aren't abstract issues. They're real dangers people are facing daily. Even that slightly unusual story from Ghana.
The mayor warning about slaughtering stray cows.
Yeah, and feeding them to prisoners. It's across the border, I know, but it's a sort of quirky glimpse into how local authorities everywhere are dealing with their own specific, sometimes strange challenges of maintaining order.
It certainly sticks in your mind. But back in Nigeria, we also hear Governor Ali of Benue saying quite bluntly, Benue is under siege.
Which just echoes the severity we heard about earlier, reinforcing Danjuma's concerns about that region.
It paints a grim picture for Benue.
It does. On a more, perhaps, proactive note, there's news about intelligence-driven security training for council chairmen in Kebbi State.
Okay, so trying to build capacity locally.
Seems like it. Focusing on local intelligence, analysis, that could be really important for a more effective response down the line.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift slightly, still under this broad theme, towards justice and legal matters. What stands out?
Well, there's the lawsuit by SERAP, the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project.
Right, they're suing the National Broadcasting Commission, the NBC.
Exactly. Over the ban on that anti-Tinubu song by Idris Abdulkarim, this immediately throws up big questions, doesn't it? Freedom of speech versus government regulation of, well, art and music.
Absolutely. A case to watch, potentially setting precedents. And then there's Yaga Africa.
Another civil society group focused on democracy.
Their call to actually criminalize electoral fraud.
Yeah.
Trying to strengthen the democratic process itself.
These are, fundamental efforts to build more robust, transparent institutions. It's vital work.
We also saw a bit of legal world drama.
You could call it that. Femi Falana, the lawyer and activist, challenging Governor Wyke.
Challenging him to report Falana to the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee.
Yeah, after Falana analyzed a court judgment, it just gives you a little peek into those sometimes quite sharp debates within the legal and political commentary scene.
Add a bit of spice, I suppose.
Yeah.
And just quickly, for context, there was that U.S. Supreme Court decision mentioned.
Right, stopping Trump from deporting certain migrants.
Just a reminder, really, that these complex legal and social issues around migration rights,
Mhm.
they're global debates, not just unique to Nigeria.
Provides a bit of perspective. Okay, shall we pivot to the economy?
Let's do it. Economic headlines. And like you said earlier, it feels like a real mix here. Some potentially good signs, but also some pretty big challenges.
Definitely. On one side, you read about this huge interest boom, 9 local banks making, what was it, N 14 trillion from loans?
Sounds incredibly profitable for the banks.
It certainly points to strong earnings in lending, yeah. But, and this is a big but, you have to set that right alongside the news that the federal government is looking for a massive $23 billion lifeline
From those same
from
banks.
those banks, yeah, to tackle the power crisis.
Wow. So that raises a question, doesn't it? If banks are making so much lending money, why does the government need such a huge bailout for something as critical as power?
Exactly. What does that tell us about the financial health of other key sectors, or maybe the government's own finances? It's
It
complex.
really is. And adding another layer, you have the central bank, the CBN, reportedly struggling to manage FX pressure,
Yeah.
foreign exchange,
Yeah, with a struggling naira, as the reports put it. So more demand for dollars than supply, basically?
which pushes the naira's value down.
Precisely. And that affects everyone. Imports get more expensive, inflation.
Right. Meanwhile, the government is talking tough with contractors, threatening to blacklist those who don't perform.
Which sounds like a necessary push for accountability, doesn't it? Trying to make sure public money on projects isn't wasted.
You'd hope so.
Yeah.
And staying with the power sector, there's another big number. Electricity customers apparently owed the distribution companies, the discos, and $497 billion in 2024.
Almost half a trillion naira. That kind of debt has got to be crippling for the discos.
And surely contributes to the financial mess that requires that government lifeline we just talked about.
It's a vicious cycle, potentially. And then you see the ripple effects elsewhere, like marketers potentially losing N 14 billion because Dangote cut petrol prices.
Shows how one big player's move can shake things up for everyone else in the market.
Absolutely. Market dynamics in action.
Okay, what about infrastructure? Any positive developments there? Seems like there were a few mentions.
Yeah, some interesting plans. Enugu State talking about building a rail line.
Linking southeast cities to on-port.
Exactly. That sounds like a major project, potentially boosting trade and connectivity for the whole region. That's the kind of long-term investment you want to see.
For sure. And there was talk about maybe a new national building commission.
And setting terms for investors in the national grid, yeah. That could streamline getting projects approved, maybe attract private money into upgrading the power grid, which, as we know, is badly needed.
Definitely. And speaking of power, the presidency budgeting N10 billion for solar.
A clear nod towards renewables. Good for the environment, good for energy security long term, hopefully.
And some immediate relief maybe for people in Abuja. An MPC cut the petrol price there.
Down to N 935 per liter.
Yeah, that'll be welcome news for drivers in the
And
capital.
every little helps, as they say. And one more from Edo State registering 9,000 certificates of occupancy, COAFOs, in just 10 weeks.
So that's impressive progress on land administration. Secure land titles, COFOs, are so important for investment and just general economic confidence.
Right. Okay, let's broaden out again. Society, culture, a real grab bag of stories here.
It really is. Starting with a sobering statistic, only 38% of Africa's population used the internet in 2024. Puts things in perspective, doesn't it? When we talk about Nigeria's digital economy, there's still a huge part of the continent, and likely Nigeria too, that's not connected.
Highlights that digital divide, but also the immense potential if access expands.
Definitely. On a more positive note, though, we saw a Nigerian talent shining. A tech entrepreneur winning a $30,000 award.
Fantastic. And Tunde Onarkoya reclaiming the World Chess Marathon record, 64 hours.
Incredible endurance and skill. Really inspiring stories.
They really are. But then you get the tragic news. The Nigerian Uber driver shot and killed in the U.S.
Yeah, that was awful. Passenger critically injured too. A really sad human story that connects Nigeria to events overseas.
It's a stark reminder of, well, the risks people face, even when working abroad.
But then, on the cultural front, a massive high note. Burna Boy.
Headlining the Stade de France in Paris. First African artist ever to do it.
Huge achievement. Just shows the global power and appeal of Nigerian music and creativity right now.
Absolutely massive. And just for general interest, NASA's oldest astronaut came back to Earth. on his 70th birthday.
A little bit of space news to mix things up.
Gives you a sense of perspective, doesn't it? All these human endeavors happening simultaneously.
True. Okay, back to Nigeria. Education news, the West African Examinations Council, WAEC.
Barring over 500 schools, 574, I think, from conducting the WASI exams in 2025.
Yeah, due to exam malpractice. That signals ongoing serious challenges with cheating in the system.
It's a perennial problem, unfortunately, and undermines the credibility of the qualifications. Tough measures needed, clearly.
On a more positive academic note, there's an upcoming inaugural lecture at Ekiti State University, EKSU.
The 89th one. So academic life, research, discourse, it continues.
And plans for a youth conference, with grassroots sessions starting in June.
Engaging young people, bringing them into the conversation, that's always important.
Yeah, and we saw traditional leadership playing a role too, the Uni of Ife laying a foundation stone.
For a N500 meaty Ekiti Chiefs Secretariat, yeah, and calling for unity. Shows the continued relevance of traditional structures in promoting, well, social cohesion.
And Governor Abiodun of Ogun State made that point about parenting.
Saying proper parenting is crucial for nation building, a societal perspective on where strength comes from.
Makes sense.
Oh.
We also have to mention the environmental impact stories. Floods in Niger State.
Tragically killing 3 people and wiping out over 10,000 hectares of rice farms.
A devastating blow to those communities and food production. Shows the vulnerability to climate events.
A very stark reminder. And on welfare, some news about pensions. Ondo State aiming to improve compliance.
And Ogun pensioners thanking Governor Abiodun for approving gratuity payments.
Small pieces of news, maybe, but important for the financial security of older citizens.
Absolutely. The headlines also included some deeply personal tragedies. The death toll rising in that Lagos building collapse.
Up to 5, I think. So sad.
And that heartbreaking story of the man dying during his wife's 60th birthday party in Lagos.
It's just awful. Reminders of life's fragility amidst all the bigger news.
Yeah. And then we had those little did-you-know facts thrown in.
Kite flying in Guyana on Easter Monday.
And cows struggling with stairs.
Huh, yeah. Little bits of trivia to lighten the mood, I suppose.
Okay, nearly there. A few more key items. Diplomacy. President Tinubu meeting Niger's leader, General Chiani.
Important for regional relations, especially given recent tensions.
And Minister Olukpobri endorsing a new book on local content.
Signals continued focus on boosting Nigerian participation in, well, key industries like oil and gas.
There's also that potential friction in the education sector, again, NADAT, the Technologist Union.
Opposing the release of M50 billion to ASU, the main academic staff union, hints at maybe ongoing disputes over funding allocation within universities.
Yeah, could be tricky. And then the political commentary really heats up. You've got contrasting views presented starkly.
Right. Reno Munkri quoted saying Tinubu's appointments are most accommodating.
And then Bishop Kuki with a much bleaker assessment, Nigeria gradually becoming a national morgue.
Very strong words, and it's crucial as we report these to stress we're just reflecting the different viewpoints out there, not taking sides.
Absolutely. Impartial reporting. We also saw Pastor Tunde Bakar quoted saying Nigeria is descending into tyranny.
Another very critical perspective on the current political direction.
So a range of opinions being voiced publicly. We also had a bit of business news, Spice 360 appointing a new MD.
A DIFILA, yes. A little snapshot of corporate moves.
And looking ahead politically, speculation about the ruling party, APC.
Possibly giving Tinubu an automatic ticket for 2027.
And the Youth Party setting its primary date and cutting fees. So early moves towards the next election cycle already.
Politics never sleeps, does it?
Seems not. Finally, some regulatory points. The NIA, the Insurers Association, and the police working together on third-party motor insurance.
Trying to strengthen enforcement there. And the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, warning celebrities.
About promoting Ponzi schemes, right? A consumer protection focus.
Exactly, trying to stop people getting scammed. And lastly, just for fun, the historical note. Henry VIII's coronation anniversary.
Nothing to do with Nigeria 2025, but interesting nonetheless.
A little historical trivia to round things off. So bring all that together, quite a whirlwind tour. What are the big themes that jump out at you from all that?
Well, definitely the security situation. It feels pervasive, multifaceted, from banditry and kidnappings to debates about state police. That's a huge concerning threat.
I agree. That's unavoidable. And the economy, too, this strange mix of, banking sector profits alongside major government borrowing needs, especially for power, it feels quite fragile, complex.
Yeah, complex is the word. But also You see ambition, don't you? The infrastructure plans, the focus on tech, the cultural successes globally.
Absolutely. There's definitely drive and achievement happening. And the social fabric, well, it's under strain in places. Education challenges, environmental disasters, tragic accidents, but also resilient, with community initiatives focused on youth, traditional leadership playing a role.
So it's a picture of a nation really wrestling with major challenges, but also pushing forward, celebrating successes.
That feels right. A snapshot, as you said, full of contrasts and complexities.
Okay, so maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Thinking about that economic picture, the bank's doing well, yet the government needing that huge loan for power. What do you think is the biggest economic opportunity or maybe the biggest challenge facing Nigeria right now based on that?
Or maybe consider the security side. With all the talk about state police versus the ongoing violence, what fundamental change do you think is most needed to actually make Nigerians safer?
Good questions. Because these things, these headlines, they might seem separate, but they're all deeply connected, aren't they?
They really are. Hopefully, this deep dive has helped draw some of those connections a bit clearer.